I think we're live. We are live. So welcome to this tasting this evening. I think a lot of you now have tuned into a few of them, or hopefully have seen a few of them in the past. So those of you who have bought the packs, we're going to be tasting through the tasting pack. So we've got Maccabee, Saneg, the PX Sherry Cask Matured, and then the Ruby Port Quarter Cask Finish. That'll be the order that we'll be tasting them in this evening. Those of you who don't have a pack, do pour yourself a dram and listen along to James and I, who will be talking about Kilchoman this evening. Also, if you've got any questions, do put them in the sidebar, and we'll try our best to answer them as we go. But also, if we do miss any, do direct message either of our social media accounts, and we'll try and get back to you. That's the boring stuff out the way, I think.
I think also, just to say, you're probably best having, if you are tasting along, or if you aren't tasting along with the stuff we have, then pour yourself anything you like. Hopefully a Kilchoman, but hey, we won't judge you if you have poor taste. And ask us any questions you like, really. But what I was going to say was, if you have got the pack, you're probably best having 4 glasses, so that you can taste through and kind of compare back as we go. So yeah, Maccabee, then Saneg, then the PX, which is not available yet, but will be soon, and then a single cask, the port single cask at the end. So that's
yeah. So sorry, James, you want to talk again?
One more thing. Water. You might want some water, maybe for the last one, probably, but maybe the PX as well. Over to you, George.
Can I talk? So I'm sure a lot of you are aware of Kilchoman. I'll just give you a little bit of history to it. James and I are brothers, and there's another brother, Peter. I'm sure some of you have met, and I've done tasting with him like this before. And Kilchoman was founded in 2005 and founded by our parents on the island of Islay. You'll probably notice that our Scottish accents aren't the strongest. Not originally from Islay, but mother's side of the family are from Islay. And we moved to Islay as a family in 2004 to found the distillery. Small farm-based distillery on Islay, growing barley, floor maltings, distilling, maturing and bottling all on site. So very, very unique and very, very special. The distillery over the years has gone through a few changes as far as new buildings. We recently opened a new visitor centre. Great timing. We opened that in end of February last year, so not many visitors have come to it as of yet. And we've also increased production, but we are still a very, very small distillery. We produce in the region of just over 300,000 litres of alcohol a year. You compare that to other distilleries in Islay, they're all producing over 500,000 litres, all the way up to Kilchoman, who are in the region of 6 million litres. So small scale production, all done by hand, very traditional. And since producing our whiskey, we've had various different releases. But the whole idea with the spirit that we produce is it's an Islay whiskey, so it is a peaty malt, but it's also got that lovely, fresh, light style of spirit. Small stills and long fermentation time. So what you're going to taste this evening is 2 of our core range, and then the PX Sherry Cask Matured, which isn't released until next month, just under 4 weeks' time. And then we've got a single cask to finish off with as well. But James and I, very informal. So if you've got questions, do put them in, and we'll try our best.
George might not know the answer, but thankfully you've got the main event over here.
And luckily James will be able to get a haircut at some point. It's a hell of a haircut you've got going on there. I think you should probably be in a house band.
The point is, I haven't had a haircut, but anyway. So we're going to start off with Maccabee. George, you've got a bottle you can show people, do you? So Maccabee is probably our best known expression. It's the most widely available of the whiskies that we've produced in our sort of 15-year history. So it's most places where they've got a decent range of whiskey. Hopefully they've got a bottle of Maccabee as well. And George kind of alluded to the style of single malt that my father intended to produce when he started Kilchoman. And this is really that embodies that kind of style that he set out to produce. So, you know, if you're not familiar with Islay is an island off the west coast of Scotland. It's actually a map behind me, but I won't try and. It's about 15, 20 miles off the west coast of mainland Scotland, and it's home to 9 distilleries now. 9 distilleries, all famous for peaty whiskies, smoky whiskies. So my dad, you know, he wanted to stay true to that tradition. So, you know, if you have a nose of Mackay Bay, you know, you'll get the peat smoke, particularly if you know it's the first whiskey you've had that day, kind of thing. You know, you're going to get the peat smoke, but the thing with Kilchoman is that behind that peat smoke, there's a huge amount of citrus sweetness, like floral, creamy quality as well. And we're looking, you know, with all Kilchomans to get that balance between the classic peaty, slightly maritime, salty, coastal, earthy style of whiskey that Islay is famous for, but kind of have our own Kilchoman-ness to it. So Mackay Bay is predominantly matured in bourbon barrels. It's 90% bourbon barrel maturation, hence why it's really quite light. So you can see they're very, very light in color. And then we also use about 10% Oloroso sherry cask maturation. And what we're looking to do with the bourbon and the sherry, you know, combining the two cask types, is with the bourbon, it will bring out the kind of coastal character that I was talking about. And it will add layers of caramel, vanilla, butterscotch from the bourbon barrels. And then with a bit of sherry maturation, we add some sort of fruitiness, you know, stone fruits, cooked fruits, peppery spiciness. So, you know, that's what we're setting out for. What do you think of my tasting notes, George?
Very good, James. It's almost like you read them off the back of the bottle.
Oh, that's straight off my head.
One thing that we are now doing is we teamed up with Coco's chocolatier in Edinburgh, and we've got our own Kilchoman chocolate, which is their sea salt and lime chocolate, which actually pairs very nicely with the Mackay Bay. That, as James is talking about, the citrus notes and also that maritime saltiness coming through, and their chocolate is fantastic. So if you haven't got a bar, you can get it on our website as well. And those team very well. And the Mackay Bay being at 46%, and everything that we do is natural color, non-chill filtered. You really do get the essence of the distillery coming out as well. And Mackay Bay is a great sort of starting point for our style of whiskey, I would say. With the bourbon cask, you really do get a net sense of the distillery coming forward.
Yeah, and there's a question from Stuart Monroe. He's got a question about what mix of first fill and second fill do you tend to use? So that's, you know, to sort of clarify that's kind of like, you know, when we buy the barrels, and for the bourbon barrels, for example, they all come from Buffalo Trace Distillery in the US. We buy them, and for Mackay Bay, it's pretty much entirely made up of fresh casks, because we want all of that character from the bourbon barrel to kind of impact the whiskey as soon as possible, because it's a relatively young whiskey, Mackay Bay, you know, 5-6 years old. You know, we want all of that flavor to come through from the bourbon barrels as quick as possible. You wouldn't get that so much, you know, the second time we use the barrels. So yeah, first fill barrels for Mackay Bay.
And it is an interesting thing with the cask itself, because when the distillery was founded, we were all about trying to produce a style of whiskey, that relatively light style of spirit that would mature relatively quickly in good casks. Hence, we buy our cask whole from Buffalo Trace in Kentucky. And then we use the refill casks. We'll age them for slightly longer in the warehouse, because you won't get as much influence from the wood as you would from those fresh casks. But those fresh casks that arrive, when they arrive at the distillery and you put your nose in the bung, the flavor that comes out of the wood is spectacular, and putting our spirit in there. Hence why the Mackay Bay, especially, you get that, you know, quite a depth of character for a relatively young whiskey. There is a lot of flavor in there. It's the freshness that I really like, and the little bit of Oloroso sherry just gives you a little bit more oil on the inside of your cheeks, and a little bit more depth of character. There was one question came in there from Tom, who was asking where the name came from for Mackay Bay. Maccabee is a beautiful beach, which is quarter of a mile from the distillery, west of the distillery, and with the most spectacular views and spectacular sunsets in the evening. Don't always be fooled by the photos, though. It makes it look like you're in the Caribbean. The weather can be like that, and it was during lockdown, as James knows, as he was locked down on Islay for most of the summer. But it is a beautiful place, and the majority of our whiskies are actually named after local landmarks that are all visible or in walking distance of the distillery. And Maccabee we launched in 2012, I think it was, as our first core range that's always available. Prior to that, we had various different releases that came and went, as far as spring, summer 2009, 10, 11 that were limited releases. But I think that's, Maccabee is a great place to start the tasting this evening.
Yeah, and as with all of our whiskies, the Maccabee, Sanaig, everything we produce is non-chill filtered, natural color. And actually, weirdly, I mean, I've been hanging around, working at the distillery, everything else for a long period now. But one thing that I learned the other day was sort of another advantage, as well as us not chill filtering, so heavily filtering and not using caramel coloring in our whiskies. We also, because we bottle on site, we don't have to heavily treat the water that we use to reduce Maccabee and Sanaig, for example. So when the whiskey comes out of the barrels, it's maybe 55, 60% ABV. We then add spring water to reduce it to 46%. That water we can just pull out of the spring and coarse filter. So we take out any kind of lumps, and it is tested, the water, but it doesn't have to be like deionized or chemically treated at all. So it's completely natural. If you bottle your whiskey away from the distillery at a commercial sort of bottling facility, you then have to meet much more regulations. So just a really interesting little nugget, I thought.
Very
interesting.
Very interesting. You had me hooked. Someone just asked there about the capacity of the distillery. Yes, the capacity of the distillery, we can produce at the moment in the region of 450,000 litres if we were going flat out 24/7. We're not doing that at the moment. We're in the region of the 350,000 litres. But that's something that might change in the future. Sorry.
Joe's got some good notes on Maccabee. So knows custard cream biscuits. I get that for sure. Campfire, yeah. So the campfire smoke is, you get kind of really different types of smoke. Smoke is so often like pigeonholed, but you get so many, like you get an oaky smoke, you get an earthy smoke, you get a maritime smoke. So yeah, campfire smoke for sure. And then the tropical fruits, bananas, pineapples. If you've ever tasted our new make, so Kilchoman before it's matured, straight off the still, absolutely loads of tropical fruit, like pear drops, very, very fruity, floral, clean spirit. So,
and also interestingly, when you taste the Maccabee and the cask strength, like the one we did at Christmas, and any tours that we've done, European tours or the tour around America at cask strength Maccabee, you really do get that essence of the tropical fruits really jumping out of the glass at that higher ABV.
And we've got people here commenting from all around the world: India, Cape Town, Germany. There was another one which caught my eye, but I can't remember it now. Massachusetts. Hello, everyone.
Hello. You sound like you're very important there, James. I can't remember if James mentioned that if you've got 4 glasses, always a good idea if you've got 4 glasses for the drams, because it's always quite good to go back, compare and contrast, especially with the Maccabee and Sanaig. Tasting them side by side is always good way to learn. They're always very interesting to taste side by side, because essentially what we're going to taste now with the Maccabee, the Sanaig, is a spirit that's distilled in the same way. It's matured in cask for a similar length of time, but the maturation process is different. So whereas Maccabee was 90% bourbon and 10% Oloroso sherry, we've now got 70% sherry cask influence and 30% bourbon cask influence. And the first thing you will notice, I always get this wrong, is the color in there. Again, all natural color, and that is coming from the sherry hogsheads that we use for the Saneg. Of course, with the Saneg, the sherry, it gives you that depth of color, and the hogsheads, because they are slightly bigger than a bourbon barrel. So bourbon barrels are in the region of 200 liters, whereas a hogshead is in the region of 250 liters. And the Oloroso sherry hogsheads really do give you that intensity of flavor, slightly sweeter style than you might get from a Oloroso sherry butt. And at Kilchoman, because we haven't got huge differences in ages in our two main core products, the Maccabee and Saneg, we have to use cask variants to show off how important the wood is. I won't use what our father uses, which is the cask is king, but essentially that is what we are showing you here, how important the wood is to the final product. And when you taste the Maccabee and Saneg side by side, you can really see the influence there. Saneg, for those of you who haven't seen it, comes in the purple packaging, named after another small inlet beach further north than Maccabee. And again, this was launched in 2016. And it really does show the influence that the sherry has on that product. I mean, you put your nose in there, you instantly get the sherry influences coming out. The peat is slightly softer for me. You don't get so much of that sort of bonfire, campfire smoke as you do with the Maccabee, because those sherry casks do come in slightly heavier, I would say, and they sort of soften off the edges slightly. And you get a lot more sort of viscous creaminess coming forward as well. The Saneg has been the one that might vary slightly in color. You might have noticed that there were slightly darker Sanegs out there, purely down to overactive cask that we had, that we used for the vatting. And all our sherry casks come from Miguel Martin, just north of Seville in Spain. Impressed by my accent there, James? It's almost...
I wouldn't say impressed by your accent.
You look shocked. In shock and all.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I remember that.
And there's a question here. So Jerry Clayton has asked, it's cold here. I'm not sure where he is necessarily, but what's the best temperature to serve your whiskey at? You want to answer
I would say room temperature. And if you do some people like to put ice in the whiskey. Some people like their whiskey. If you like your whiskey cold, then of course you could, and you like ice in it. I would always recommend, rather than ice, maybe use the ice, the rocks, or some cold water instead. But essentially, I always think that it's however you enjoy it. Is the best.
I quite often drink my whiskey with ice, and every time I do it partly because I like the drink cold, and if we're at home, I do it also for the fun of seeing the look on Dad's face when I drop ice into his whiskey. But there's no right way to drink whiskey. I think if you're looking to really analyze the flavor, adding ice won't help you discover the flavor. Room temperature, you'll be able to more accurately kind of pick up on the character, the flavor. But personally, sometimes I like a cold drink, so I add ice. Sometimes I add fizzy water.
But you make a drink, you always stack the glass full of overflowing with ice. So it's all personal preference. And tasting this evening, there will be people that will pick up different notes, different aromas, and it's such a personal thing. But yeah, James does enjoy winding our dad up with the ice, because every time he does it, doesn't matter, he's done it countless times now, he gets the same reaction every single time, and he's never going to get bored of that.
I've stopped short of opening a can of Coke though and pouring it in. I think I wouldn't go that far.
But I do agree, in the summer, it is nice. A tall glass, ice, and some fizzy water is a nice drink. But again, if you're doing a tasting like this, if you really want to get into the whiskey itself, then room temperature is the best way to taste it. And don't be afraid to add water to your whiskies. These are both 46%, and water will maybe slightly dull down the alcohol content, bring out flavors that you might not be picking up, and it will change it slightly. But I'd always say put less water in. You can always add more water, and I suppose you could just keep on topping up the whiskey, but just slowly add the water, because it's amazing how just a couple of drops will change the profile. I love the Saneg, the depth of flavor that you're getting from those sherry casks, almost a peppery spice. The smokiness is slightly softer, and you've got those far more sort of cooked fruits, raisins, but maybe a bit of dark chocolate in there as well. And it's a far more complex dram, you might say, compared to the Maccabee.
Yeah, I'd probably stop short saying complex, but it's an entirely different side to Kilchoman. When you consider these are both exactly the same spirit, so they come off the still and they're exactly the same. This is only the difference in cask. Saneg being mainly sherry and Maccabee being mainly bourbon matured. That's contributing all of the flavor, because they're, in terms of the flavor difference. So the age is about the same, the strength is about the same. They've been matured in the same warehouses, reduced with the same reducing water. So there's a question from Oliver as well. Any plans to work on a distribution center in Europe for special releases and tasting packs? He's saying shipping costs are ridiculously high after Brexit. This is we're always looking at options for this. The trouble is it's changing all the time, so we are doing our best, and we absolutely sympathize, because we know how much people want these packs and how much people want the special editions. So we are working on it, and we haven't found a perfect solution yet, but hopefully we will soon. And to that point, some people, I believe, haven't received packs perhaps that they ordered. I'm not sure when they ordered them or whether they're delayed or what. But this will be recorded and available to kind of watch back when you have your packs, when your packs do arrive. So when they do, please, if you have any questions, just message us, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. But apologies, it is an absolute nightmare, and much more so, for you guys, you have to, pay for it, and then the pack's not arrive, so I can appreciate how frustrating that can be. But on a more positive note, Joe.
I've got a question for you, James. Why did Kilchoman decide to go with traditional floor malting method?
Don't you know the answer, George?
Well, I'm asking you the question. The idea. I mean, I can answer if you want me to.
No. So I think there's lots of different reasons for it. Really, I think one of the main reasons is taking the traditional approach. So floor maltings is the traditional way of malting. Barley. The amount of barley that we grow at the distillery is sufficient to not require anything more sophisticated than a regular malt floor. The cost of putting in a traditional floor maltings is much lower than the other options, which maybe drums or saline boxes or stuff like that. So I don't think I've said that right, but the alternatives are much more expensive, and at a time where we didn't have a lot of money, in the early days, floor maltings fitted the bill for us. Even though, well, I was going to say that other, maybe more modern approaches are more consistent. Perhaps they are, but you still have a lot of flexibility with the malting, with the floor malting. But it is something that's taken us quite a while to kind of get to grips with. I think the stills and how to operate the stills, how to do all of that side of the making whiskey has been relatively straightforward. The malting side, handling the malt, the spaces you need, the equipment you need, and the variance, between how your equipment will allow you to do it compared to someone else. It's taken us it took us maybe 4 or 5 years to really get to grips with the malting side of stuff.
Yeah, and I think with the size of the batches we were doing originally when we first started, 2-ton batches, the floor maltings. I mean, we now have a bigger malt floor, sort of better, far better kiln as well. And as James says, there's now people that their sole job is looking after the malt, whereas when we first set up until probably 2012, 13, maybe even longer than that, the malt was sort of whoever was on shift at the time would also go and look after the malts on the floor or go and check the fire and the kiln, whereas now it's far more focused.
Yeah.
Someone's asking where we've hidden Peter and Dad. Sadly, you've got the better pair this evening. Dad, he does more Q&As.
Yeah.
He's probably not even watching.
Tom, Till has a great. So, is there any? You can answer this one, George. So, is there an experiment you would like to try with a whiskey, for example, aging in dark beer casks, super peated? Short take on that.
I mean, it's something that our father now is taking a bit more of a step back from the sales and marketing side, and what he loves doing more than anything is experimenting with different cask types. So, I mean, we've filled a number of different experimental cask types. Calvados, tequila, mezcal, wine casks. So we've experimented a lot on that side at the moment. We haven't done any dark beer casks at the moment, but it's not to say that it's not something that we would look at.
We are actually doing it.
We are actually doing it.
Yeah, we are. Well, people have done it with our. We haven't done it. No, you're right. Forget.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people have matured beer and gin and other things in our ex casks. And as far as the peating levels go, I think we have done a few unpeated casks, especially with our own barley when the kiln wasn't working. I think at the moment we aren't going to experiment too much with going on the very, very high, heavily peated area. It's something that we have the capability of. It's far easier for us to lower the peating level with our own barley than it is to really ramp it up at the moment. But the cask maturation and also different types of yeast that we've been experimenting with as well. And also now we've got the 2 still houses that were finished the year before, 2 years ago, 2019, I think it was. So we now have a still house, the new still house, which was solely for distilling our 100% Islay. So the 100% Islay is made from barley that is purely from Kilchoman, from Rockside Farm. And then we've got the older still house, which is used for what we call commercial malt. So everything that we're tasting this evening is what we class as commercial malt, which is malt that we buy in from Port Ellen Maltings on Islay, which is peated at roughly 50 parts per million. So relatively high on the peating level, compared to the other distilleries in Islay as well.
And there was another question about things like triple distillation and everything you can think of: super heavily peated, unpeated, yeast varieties, cask types, methods for maturation. These are all on our to-do list, and they are very much things that we plan to do. It's just a question of when we're able to get around to them. So hopefully in time we will do a triple distillation. We'll do super heavily peated. We've got a lot of flexibility, particularly with the new sort of stills that we put in. We've added in some little big pieces of equipment which allow us to experiment much more easily. So at the moment, sort of the last year, the yeast has really been a pet project of my dad, and he's tried all sorts of different yeasts, and it's not the sexiest part of whiskey, talking about yeast, but it has a big impact on the flavor, as well as on top of the stuff that George said, barley varieties, because we're not obviously, but we do distill individual barley varieties that we grow ourselves. So we're also looking at the impact of those barley varieties and how we can pair them up with maturation and stuff like that as well.
One question that popped up here that we'll be sort of covering later on is smaller casks. We have used quarter casks in the past, bourbon ones, and then we're also going to, one of the whiskies we're going to taste this evening has been finished in export quarter casks. So they are something that we've used in the past, the smaller casks. So yeah, it is something, and I think now, especially with the increased production, we have got a lot more spirit to play with in a certain degree as well. So these experiments will be coming slightly more sort of frequent now. But like everything with whiskey, it always takes a bit of time. Ben, when will the next Amburach be, James? When are you next going to make a mistake?
Next time I wake up on a terrible hangover. Well, the Fèis, you know, the usual festival is usually the day after that is where you'd probably predict there might be some colossal cock up, but because everyone turns up hungover. But so maybe next year. Hopefully the festival will be on next year. So and yeah, to that point, the visitors, we will. I believe the visitor centre will reopen. It's not really our call, to be honest. It's more my mum and the guys in the visitor centre. You know, they've made that call, but I do believe we're planning to open kind of when visitors are allowed to come to the island. I think that's the sort of the point at which we'd be opening. Yeah,
I think that's the sort of the main thing at the moment is yeah, at the end of the day, we would love to be able to welcome everyone there now, but we have to be sensible and have to, like everyone is at the moment. And as soon as we are able to, we will be very much looking forward to welcoming you all back, especially with our new visitor centre, which is sat pretty empty and sad for over 12 months now. So yeah, no, we can't wait to welcome you all back. And I forgot to mention that we also have a chocolate for the to pair with the Saneg that you can get through our website, and that is the haggis, spice, and dark chocolate one. Which I think when James and I did the test to make sure this was working earlier on, James's packets were half empty. I've probably finished them by now, have you?
Well, I had a late night tasting last night, so I had to keep my energy levels up.
Keep the energy up. But the see if we've missed. Do we always use first fill cast, James?
Not always. It just depends on the bottlings. You know, for stuff under probably, you know, everything you see from Kilchoman maybe under 8 years old, probably mainly fresh casks. Over 8 years old, we'll be a bit more open-minded to the refills.
And also another quick question there is from Patrick in Belgium asking about Madeira cask matured.
Patrick, hello Patrick. I know Patrick. He loves the Madeira. He bought like basically every bottle that went to Madeira to Belgium last time. So is
that why your sales figures look so good?
He'll be pleased to hear that. Yeah, there'll be another Madeira limited edition release at the end of this year. So.
Just another quick question here. Michael asked about the yeast, and he asked if it's just in the alcohol, but actually when we did, I think it was last year, our dad did a tasting at it must have been the year before, sorry, did a tasting at the festival with Dave Broom, and they purely tasted 4 or 5 different spirits distilled with different yeast varieties. And it was amazing the difference of flavor from pressed to powder to liquid yeasts. Yeah. And yes, that is something that we will be in the process of showing off a lot more when they become more matured into whiskey.
Yeah.
James, someone's surprised you're awake after last night's event.
I'm fueled up.
He's drinking through it, David.
I'll be asleep. I'll be asleep after this, don't you worry.
Any excuse to get out of, looking after his 2 young children, probably.
Hopefully they're asleep by now, so I'll be on drinking duty full time. Anyway, the next one we're gonna taste is the PX. So I think the only way that people have been able to taste this is if they bought a pack. I believe. Yeah. I don't think so. This is a limited edition bottling that we will be launching on the 5th of May.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this is a sort of preview of that. And it's so PX is a sweet sherry. I'm sure many of you are familiar with PX sherry. Much sweeter than Oloroso sherry, which is more of a kind of dry, rich influence on the whiskey. PX is much more of a syrupy, sweet influence. And so you've got PX at one end, at the sweet end. You've got Oloroso kind of in the middle in terms of the spectrum of flavor from a sherry cask, and then you've got Fino, right down at the dry end. So this is a vatting of 33 casks that we have selected for this bottling. 9 of them were only matured in the PX cask, so a full maturation in Pedro Jimenez. And then 24 of those 33 were initially matured in the bourbon cask and then finished for between 12 and 18 months in PX. So it's a combination of full maturation and finishes. The reason we did that was because these are fresh casks, they're fresh PX casks, and they can be quite hard to manage. Often the PX flavor will kind of overwhelm the kind of typical distillery character that we want to kind of maintain. So to keep that flavor, the influence from the PX and the influence from the distillate in balance, we use some finishing casks as well as full maturation. And, more often than not, if you've tasted Kilchoman in PX before, it would have been a finish as well, because what you've got with a finish is kind of a nice warm blanket of PX sweetness. Whereas with the full maturation, it can often go really too far, and you end up with this slightly dry, slightly astringent kind of PX influence. So what my dad did with this was just try and get that balance with the two methods of maturation. And we bottled it slightly higher, 47.3, just to give it a bit more weight, because it's a limited edition. We like to bottle them at a higher strength, and so we felt 47.3 was just really hit the nail on the head in terms of getting that power without again sort of overwhelming the dram too much.
And also those fresh casks that James talks about, the full maturation, they've only been in there in the region of just over 5 years, I believe. So these casks, these hogsheads, give you, especially the Pedro Jimenez, we've used them for the finishes in the past, and they really do come in very, very strong with the flavor. And it's one of those ones that has to be monitored quite heavily when they're maturing. But I think this is the first time I've tasted it when the pack arrived, and it's another different style of Kilchoman. And there's going to be, someone asked about bottle count, and I believe there's going to be in the region of 12,000 bottles.
You did. There's no way you knew that. I mean, if you tried to convince people that you knew that off the top of your head, you did a terrible job, because you looked at your screen and then you looked at your paper.
Well, I didn't have to write that down and also, you wrote down the 24 and 9 because you were looking down like that. So,
Yeah. This is fantastic. On the one hand, I really like the PX influence coming through, because this is absolutely lethal stuff, because you could throw this back in seconds and do it again and again, and you'll be on your way to falling in the ditch. But it also has so on the surface it has this very drinkable side to it, but then underneath that it has a lot of the kind of citrus, the maritime smoke. It's got this lovely kind of leathery tobacco kind of flavor coming through as well. It's got the sultanas and the kind of prunes, stone fruit, cooked fruit kind of influence that you expect with PX. But for me, the sort of surprise of it is that you still have that kind of Islay distinct coastal character coming through, which I think makes it really great.
It's also, for me, it's quite surprisingly fresh, if that makes sense. There's also a lot of freshness in there, which you might not always associate with a Pedro Jimenez matured. Helen was asking there about, is it the same person who always decides when the whiskey has been in the cask for long enough? Yeah,
I mean, people often think that we have a say in what whiskey is put out at Kilchoman. But Kilchoman is not a democracy; it is a dictatorship. And my father sits there behind his desk, and we can give our opinion, but it's usually thrown straight back in our faces for some reason or another.
He occasionally listens, but then just sort of goes, well,
he doesn't. The thing is, it does go in, but he doesn't want us to know that he agrees with what we might have had to say. So yeah, but I also think it's important to have that kind of singular vision of this is good, this is bad, this is Kilchoman. I think it's important to have that because, and I think it's a great thing about Kilchoman is that you can pick up any bottle, you can have any dram you see behind the bar from us, and they're each going to have their unique qualities, but they fit within a style, which means you can kind of trust what you're picking up from the shop or buying from the bar. So it's not wildly different. We don't have stuff that's super heavily peated or unpeated, and I think. Do you understand?
Yeah, no, I think I completely get what you're saying, and I think that there is what we always want to come forward, and what our father is all very passionate about is there is a Kilchoman style that has to be in there, and then you have whether it's the Pedro Jimenez cast that we've used here, so you have to have the influence of the Pedro Jimenez coming in, and then similarly with the Loch Gorm, you have to have the Kilchoman DNA and then the influence around it of the Oloroso sherry cask. And our father's background was in wine previously, and then also in independent bottling. So always been drinking his whole life, and therefore nosing and tasting is something that he enjoys. And he does get a bit more help now. Just doesn't. He never asks us for the help. I don't think we should take it personally.
Maybe he's just not asking you, George. He values my opinion. He cherishes it.
I'm not sure I believe that one at all. I think probably the fact that you would have gone, yeah, I'll taste this, and then just chuck a load of ice in it to taste it in front of him to wind him up might not go down that well. But no, I mean, he is now slightly mellowing in his old age, we might say. But
yeah,
we can't grumble too much. The whiskies that, especially at the moment, it's something that he really is enjoying.
Marius has got a very distinctive profile picture.
Do you think that's Marius?
I don't think so. What led to the development of your STR? Definitely one of his favourites. Do you want to take this one?
So the STR, the shaved, toasted and recharred. So when Kilchoman was founded by a father, he went and spoke to a sort of a genius of a man and someone who was very, very heavily involved in Kilchoman was a guy called Dr. Jim Swan, who essentially was the man who helped our father put together how the shape of the stills, cut points. Our father knew the style of whiskey he wanted to produce, but needed that help getting there. And one of the things that Dr. Jim Swan was involved in was shaved, toasted and recharred ex-red wine cast, and this is something that he recommended that we did. Cavalan, who he was involved with as well, also did it, and it's something that we did, and we released it last year or the year before. Can't remember now.
Year before last. I think.
Year before last, and it was extremely popular, and it's something that we will be doing again, and it's something that has worked very well, and the flavour profile, marrying with Kilchoman and the peat and that influence that you get through from not only the red wine but also through from the sort of shaved emblem of the cask really did balance nicely with our style of whiskey. So it's something that we will be doing in the future again for sure, and something that we would like to do in a far larger scale. Yeah.
I think there are plans to have it, if not part of our core range at some point in the future, certainly, something that comes around with good regularity.
I mean, I with that, but then the danger is that whenever we say anything like this at a tasting, that then tomorrow we'll get an email saying, by the way, we're not doing STR for another 10 years or something.
You've got to throw in that caveat, So.
But no, I mean, Jim Swan is someone that our father had, and I know he's hugely respected within the industry, but he's someone that helped our father massively in the early days, and especially latterly, who very sadly died. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man, and the STR is something that he was his brainchild. So hopefully that answers the question. Yeah, and to Jim.
There's another question here, so about peat, and I'll take this one. So
you take that one.
One of the big sort of things that we would never compromise on at Kilchoman is the fact that we use Islay peat to smoke, to peat our barley. It always comes from Islay, but we have two sources of malted barley. So one that we grow and peat ourselves, and then separate supply that comes from the Port Ellen maltings on Islay. And the peat that we cut and use ourselves for our barley that we're growing, that comes from around Loch Gorm. It's cut by Derek, who works on the malt floor in the warehouses. He has some peat banks and he cuts the peats by hand. And then the peat that's used by the maltings is cut from the Rins mostly, I believe, at the moment. So it's, not far from Kilchoman at all, within 4 or 5 miles. But then also, I guess they do cut it from other areas of the island as well. So, you're talking detail within detail, I guess, so I've never looked at where peat comes from necessarily and how the flavor changes. What I have done is speak to Derek about different layers of peat. So, the top peat will be much more, phenolic and much more, give you much more of that smoky, peaty flavor. The deeper you go down, the more the closer you get to kind of coal, and that's simplifying it, of course. But essentially, I think the layers of peat are as important as where the peat comes from. Certainly, when you're talking about a small area like Islay. If you compared Islay peat with mainland peat, then there'd be a clear difference. Mainland peat's going to be much more ashy compared to the maritime flavour of Islay peat.
But also, I think the level of the amount of peat we use at the distillery itself is very, very small, and it's great that it's actually one of the guys that works in the still house that has the peat bank that we can get the peat from, which is also very nice. Someone was also
just on that point. So you can kind of envisage, because peat bogs are obviously essential to the environmental. I don't know what I'm going, but it's essential to our responsibility to the environment that we maintain these areas, and the amount that we use is roughly a wheelbarrow a week is approximately what we're using. So it's not vast extraction of peat bogs. It is really quite small.
There's been a few questions about the Islay Festival and the Feis Eel. And what we'll be doing. We will be doing some things online, and
lots of things online.
It'll be a brilliant day, and we'll all
do it down.
I'm not doing it down at all, but I'm saying that the best way to get all the information that we'll be announcing in a couple of weeks' time is either by joining the Kilchoman Club through our website or on our social media platforms. We'll be putting out all the information about tasting packs, online events that we'll be doing, Q&As, festival bottling. All that information will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. And we have a day planned, the whole day, I think it is. Most of the day we'll be doing various different things. It won't just be James there. Last year it was just James with his broom handle with a microphone on. Hopefully, we'll all be able to get back to Islay to help out with the festivities this year. But of course, it's all dependent on the rules that are in place at the time. But we have got lots planned, and it will be fun and it will be entertaining.
There will, and you know, the big question is, will there be a festival bottling? Yes, there will be, yeah, the best way to ensure that you don't miss out on any of the information and the launch dates and stuff like that is to sign up to the sort of club. So I believe it's just been posted on Facebook and YouTube. So the best thing to do is sign up to that, and you'll get an email with all of the details. So yeah.
And that's not done by us, because we're not. It's obviously someone who's far more tuned into these things than us. But no, it was a great shame last year, and this year we've had a bit more time to plan it as far as what we're going to do. So tune in if you. And someone asked if our dad ever does any of these online events. He will definitely be doing a couple of things on the open day, and then we'll also try and wheel him out at some point to do another one on here. But we will let you know if he's going to make an appearance. Normally, when I last started a tasting with him, his Wi-Fi went down, and then he popped up holding his phone under his nostrils, saying, "Don't worry, I'm back. But no, he does enjoy doing these things. He does quite a lot of them now, so he's fairly tuned into it all. But whiskey number 4 of the evening, the final whiskey that we're going to taste this evening. This is because we can't welcome visitors to Islay at the moment. What we tend to do at the visitor centre shop is have a bottling always available that you can buy when you come to Islay, that's not available anywhere else. Because we can't do that, we've put these online now. So this is our current online shop exclusive, which is a ruby quarter cask finish that is available on our website. And this is a single cask, bottle of cask strength, which is 55.1%. So this has been matured in an ex-bourbon cask for 8 years before being finished in a ruby port quarter cask for just over 12 months, or in the region of 12 months. Quarter casks are just over 100 litres. And what you're getting there is a lot of impact from the port influence. A lot of you will be aware that we've done port cask matured in the past. I think this was bottled in 2018. We did a fully matured ruby port cask there, and this has been a finish. And with the finishes, what we're looking to give you there is we are looking to give you the influence of the bourbon, influence the DNA of Kilchoman, but also those summer red fruits coming forward from the ruby port casks. For me, you just get that lovely, you still get that Kilchoman peat smoke and that little bit of citrus notes, but you get that lovely bit of sort of summer fruits coming through, almost like cooked red fruits, macerated red fruits, and that lovely, but the main thing, and what we talked about earlier on when selecting casks and selecting vattings, what our father's trying to do is keep that Kilchoman DNA in there. And you can definitely get that coming forward as well. This is slightly older than what we've tasted so far this evening, but you've still got that lovely freshness in there as well. 12 months in these quarter casks. The danger is if you left it in there maybe for slightly longer, those red fruits and that creamy sweetness, the sort of butterscotch coming over, might just slightly overpower it. But I think the balance is nice in there, as the freshness and also the cask influence. Someone's already done your taste notes for you here, James.
Yeah, I like it when people do that.
It just makes your job a lot easier, does it?
Well, usually they're much more imaginative than I am. But for me, I think it's this is lovely. Again, what I love about a lot of these whiskies, the PX and the Ruby Port in particular, is you still have that like distinctly Islay character.
Yeah.
But then at like almost the totally opposite end of the spectrum for the Ruby Port cask, you have this really citrusy red fruits, tropical fruits, stone fruit kind of, pop to it. So, two completely different flavors, but they somehow kind of reach an equilibrium and don't, overwhelm each other.
No, I think there is that that nice balance of the bourbon cask still coming out with the freshness in there. But no, the ruby port does really add a nice layer of those sort of red fruits quality to it, but it's not overpowering it too much at all. At 55.1% ABV that we're drinking right now, I would always say try it without water, but do not be afraid to add a little bit of water, and just see how it slightly changes the style of the whiskey. I haven't done it yet, but I am going to put a couple of drops in now. I've even got a pipette, James. That's how.
You're not a pipette guy, are you?
No, I don't know where they came from. It must have come from when I did a whiskey show all those many months ago that we last did a whiskey show.
Here we go. We got a question about age statements here. So, and if we're aiming to finish at the hour mark. So if there are any questions, we've got 4 or 5 more minutes to go. So just fire them in, and we'll answer as many as we can. But there's a question here about age statements. Does your spirit perform best around 10, 12 years old? I guess there's 2 sides to this. Yeah. There's the limited edition question, and then the spirit performing best question. In terms of the age statements, I think you're more likely to see older age statements than younger age statements from Kilchoman in the near future. So you're more likely to see 14 and 15, 18, 20-year-old single casks than you are to see a 10-year-old bottling, at the same price as Mac Bay. So yeah, I mean, age statements are part of our thinking, but probably more likely older age statements than younger ones.
I think now, especially, there are a few single casks out there of that older level, but yeah. If you looked at our stock profile, we've got just over 10,500 casks in our warehousing now at Kilchoman. But if you look through the age profile of that, yes, we started distilling in 2005, but 2005, 6, 7, 8, and maybe even 2009 stock levels aren't at the level that allow us to do a slightly larger release of an age statement. And we wouldn't want to just completely wipe out one year. So I think there's a 10-year-old. There is a 10-year-old on our website available at the moment as well, fully matured 10-year-old fresh bourbon cask that's also available on our website. So, I mean, the argument, there's some people that say when we start releasing these older whiskies that Kilchoman is better as a 4, 5, 6-year-old, and then some people like the older style of Kilchoman. But it's interesting the combination of fresh versus refill when you get to those slightly older ages.
Yeah, and yeah, on the question to do with the spirit performing best, I think my dad's always said that Kilchoman was designed in many ways to be good at a young age. The fermentation time being 90, 100 hours. The way that we distill the cask that we mature in, all of those elements, which are the big factors in how a whiskey will mature. All of those really gear it towards a relatively short maturation. So yeah, I mean, Kilchoman is great at any age from 6 to 12 years old, from what I've tasted, 14 years old and on. I think the key will be, you can turn Kilchoman into a fantastic young whiskey. What we need to do now is make sure that we turn it into a fantastic old whiskey as well, and that'll come down to cask management. So refill casks, second refill casks, and filling enough of them in the first place, and then allowing them to mature on into the late teens, 20s, and on. So that comes down to my dad. So you have to take it up with him.
Yeah.
Oh, George disappeared. Well, we're coming up to the end here anyway. So I did get a message from Catherine, who said that.
I don't know what happened there.
No, I was just saying it was coming up to the end anyway. So I believe you can still comment on the Facebook feed, and we can answer your questions, at a later date. On YouTube, if you have any questions, I don't believe that is the case. So if you do want to get in touch, then you can either do it on our social media platforms, or you can email us, info@kilchomandistillery.com, and we'll get back to you there. Similarly, you can go through the website and everything else. But from my side, I'd like to thank everyone for coming along, tasting the whiskies, listening to the questionable insight from me and George. Hopefully you've got a better feel for the distillery and the whiskies we make. So yeah, thanks very much, and we'll see you next time. I don't know what plans we have. Maybe George, you can next tasting.
I imagine the next one that we'll be doing will be festival stuff. We might try and squeeze one in before the festival, but I don't think we've got anything firmed up at the moment. But again, as we said before, anything that we're going to do, we'll put out on all our social media. But we'll be concentrating on making sure that we get all these tasting packs sorted for the festival. So thank you very much. That wasn't me just checking out before and going, right, I've had enough of this. I'm not sure what happened there, but thank you very much for coming. Nice to see you, James.
Always good to see you, George.
Right.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.